Hey there, Jeffo here. Today we're going to take apart this carburetor. I'm not sure what manufacturer or exactly the application, but we're going to take it apart, find out what's inside. How about if we put it back together too? Alright, let's see what we got here. And here it is. This is a classic constant velocity carburetor. See our slide here, butterfly on the fuel side, throttle linkage, accelerator pump. See if we can't get her open and see what's inside. Gotta clean your lens. Clean your lens, guys. So I got two things going on here. Got my carb, I got my notes. I've looked at how to pull this thing apart beforehand, and I'm going to check that out before I dive into this so I can keep my order of operations straight. CV carbs. So let's get into it. Fantastic. Alright, I think my first move here will be to remove my accelerator pump screw, mounting screws, get that off of there. Or my first move here will be to remove my throttle cable guides. Grab my Phillips head, start getting in here. Let's start up top. Carefully remove all these screws so I don't strip anything. My slide cover. This is spring loaded, so I want to keep pressure on the top to keep everything from popping up before I want it to. Remove my last screw here. Should come right up. I've got my cap off, my spring. Here's my diaphragm. And I'll pull my slide cover or my spring guide out. My needle. Inspect this. .828. And I'll pull out my slide and diaphragm. So now I've got the top of the carb opened up. Here is my slide and diaphragm. Go ahead and inspect this. Seems fine. wonder about these holes and their orientation. I thought this could go in either way, but now that I'm looking at this, I think that it might need to be specifically positioned. I'm going to go ahead now and pull my enrichener off. Should just be finger tight. There is a spring behind this, so I'll keep an eye on that. And it just sprung on me. Enrichener, housing, and here is where my choke or enrichener cable would come in and seat. Looks good. Now I'm going to come down to the bottom of the carb, flip her upside down, and look at my bowl area and my accelerator pump area. I'm going to start by cracking these screws loose, making sure not to strip anything. Booyah. The bowl itself. That was a little bit hard, so I'm going to try another technique here. Grab my 1/4 inch drive ratchet with an adapter and a small Phillips head bit. The number 2 Phillips head, I think, should do the trick. Making sure not to use my posi drive. So here we go, a little bit difference between them both, but this one should work fine. Get this seated, make sure I'm loosening. Now I've got a little bit more of a handle of a surface area to work with to break this loose. There we go, heard it crack there. Next, that one was not too bad. And the last one, loose. Set this aside. Finish removing these with my number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. And I want to keep these screws separate from what I pulled off the top. I just like to keep the top and bottom separate, so I've got a different container here for those. Numero 2, 3, and 4th. Okay. My float bowl should be loose now. So I'll remove that. Here we are. Got my bowl removed. Now I'm looking at my float assembly. My main jet, my slow speed jet way down in here. Let's get this stuff removed. Let's see what we can do. Remove my float bowl pin. By pushing it loose. Improvise a little toothpick here. Here we are. My float bowl pin. Remove my float bowl itself, along with its needle here. just hangs off a small hanger on the bowl. And I want to check, make sure that this is working freely, and I'll be very, very gentle with a pair of needle-nose pliers, make sure that it's not bound up or anything. Then I'll give it a little bit of a test to see if it springs back up. It does. Foot bowl looks great. Clean, foot looks good. Now I'll remove my jets. Start with my main jet and see if the emulsion tube comes with it or not. Main jet popped right loose. Pull this out. Take a look down there and see if I can see any gunk or anything, and it looks clear. It's brand new, so it should. Now for my emulsion tube, having taken this apart before, I know it's an 8mm. Got my 1/4" drive socket ready. Gently remove this. My emulsion tube is removed. It looks great. I'll now remove my needle guide, my needle seat guide, which is down the main passage of the carburetor. Let's see if I can just poke that out through the bottom. Here it is. Not threaded or anything, so it can just come right out. Alright, let's hear it for cameras dying. Now, I'm going to see with my smallest screwdriver if I can remove this slow speed or idle jet. I can feel it's engaged in the slot, keeping downward pressure, making sure I don't bounce on it at all. Alright, you can hear that it is out of its threads, and remove it. It's really small. It's maybe 10,000ths wide is my guess. It's got its own emulsion system built in. Very nice. Now I'm going to move on to, since I'm down here and I didn't do it before, my slow speed adjustment screw, which is again spring loaded. So I want to be careful not to have it pop out. It's out of its threads. There should be a spring, a washer, and an O-ring all on one assembly. Now what I didn't do there, and I should have, is see how far it was adjusted before I removed it. However, I know that it was 2 turns from bottom because I just disassembled and reassembled this thing yesterday. But that's an important note to make, is how far your slow speed adjustment screw is in number of turns from the bottom of its thread. Alright, let's move on. Let's come back to the bowl. You can see my O-ring still in place and in good condition. I'm gonna look at my accelerator pump now. Now I loosened these earlier when it was still attached to the rest of the carburetor body, so that now when it's smaller and a little bit more awkward, I don't have to wrestle it. These screws are all ready to come out. This accelerator pump does house a spring, so I'm keeping some pressure on the plate here to keep it from popping open on me before I want it to. Now I can open it up. You see the spring I was talking about and the little accelerator pump diaphragm, which I will gently remove. We can see that the crown looking side was down, the dish side was up to hold the spring. Now, with that removed, that concludes my disassembly. Let's see if I can get everything in the frame here to take a look at. I've been using magnetic parts holders, and I'll explain why. The reason why is I like them better than the cardboard box. If I were doing something long term and keeping this disassembled, I would use a shoebox or a cardboard box and stick my screws and parts through them and even circle them and label them for the next person. But I'm going to disassemble, or I'm going to assemble this again right now. So I just made sure to keep my parts in an order that I remember, which is all of my beginning level stuff, including my throttle cable bracket, all my upper slide items, which I would need this, it's a big deal, including my spring and my enrichener, all to one side. And then my lower float bowl and accelerator pump items in their own container. So, now that we've noted those, I'm going to go ahead and start assembling this again. So I'm going to start where I ended in disassembly, and that is with my accelerator pump. Get my diaphragm back in, make sure it's clean and free of debris and dog hair. My spring and the cap. I'm going to be careful to, of course, assemble this in the correct order, but also not pinch the diaphragm. First screw. I want to ensure that I'm not cross-threading or stripping or over-tightening any of these screws. Carburetor is a small, delicate item. These screws may or may not be of different lengths. Let's see here. So I'm tightening this down, and I just want to go fingertips plus. Fingertips plus. Fingertips plus is the name of my favorite band. My accelerator pump is back in. So I'm happy. The lower part of my bowl is assembled. Now I'm going to work on getting the bowl back on by first reinserting my slow speed adjustment screw. And I want to keep this assembly together. And if I turn it upside down, it'll fall apart again, so I'm going to turn the carburetor body itself upside down and insert this vertically upwards. See if I can get it started just with my fingertip. Looks like I have. Grab my screwdriver, my flathead here, standard screwdriver, get this going. Now, while I'm inserting this, I'm going to take it slowly, gently, all the way to the bottom of its thread. You can hear that spring tensioning or compressing. I'm at the bottom of my thread. I'm going to bring it back to its previous adjustment, which is 2 full turns from bottom. There's a half, 1, 1.5, and 2. Accelerator or slow speed adjustment screw accounted for. I'm going to grab my slow speed jet, small guy, and insert it into its home. Ensure that I'm matching my threads and not stripping, which I am. This is going in nicely, and it's at the bottom of its thread. Just fingers tight. That's it. I don't want to cause any problems with the soft brass. Now I'll get my needle seat guide in place in preparation for my main jet. I want to make sure it's seated properly, and I can see it sticking out of its home inside the main passage. Now I've got my main jet, or my emulsion tube, and my main jet to work with. I'm going to start my main jet into my emulsion tube by hand outside of the body. Now I'm going to insert my emulsion tube into its threads, and it is at the bottom of its thread, so I'm just going to slightly give it a fingertip turn and just a tad more. It is inserted. I'm going to grab my standard screwdriver, do the same with the jet, because these are known to fall out. I'm going to go fingertip. I'm giving downward pressure and just a little bit beyond my fingertip pressure. Feels good. All my assembly here is done, all my jets. Now I'm going to get my float bowl and needle. Hang my needle back off. Slowly insert this into its home. Grab my float bowl pin. This one can go either direction. Some are tapered, however. Get this. I'll skewer the hinge of the bowl. Make sure that I'm moving freely and that my needle is still on its hanger, which it is. Everything is moving nicely. Now I can get the bowl back on the main assembly, and here I'm going to watch out for my accelerator pump linkage. Make sure that it reaches its home to press all the way down on the diaphragm. The accelerator pump action will be complete. I want to make sure that my O-ring stays in place, so I'm actually going to pick up the carburetor entirely. And carefully float bowl pin had come out of its home. Grab my accelerator pump linkage and make sure that my O-ring isn't pinched, is just in its seated properly. I'll grab my float bowl screws, get them started. Again, making sure I'm not cross-threading, just get it into its threads. I'm not tightening it yet. I am still holding the entire bowl assembly on with my thumb. Don't like how that feels. Just gonna back it out. Sure that they all line up properly. There we go. I'll go finger tight there, plus tight, plus finger tight there, plus and finger tight, plus is my favorite nursery rhyme. You can see that my needle seat guide is still in place, doing well. So I'm done with my lower carburetor items. I'm going to start with the upper part. I'll grab my enrichener assembly. I will get it inserted. And this is just a plastic cap, so more gentle maneuvers here. I will pressure the spring down. I'm actually going to make sure I'm square, but I'm going to unscrew until I feel the threads start, until I feel the male threads insert into the female. Now I'm going to work this down with my fingers and just literally finger tight. And that is inserted. I'm going to get my slide assembly in order. Get my needle in place, and now my spring guide retainer, my spring itself, and insert all of this into my carburetor, ensuring that my needle properly seats into its guide. Now, with my seat, with my slide in place, I'm going to use a draping technique with my diaphragm to make sure that it seats properly in the top of the carburetor. I'm going to grab my cap, which is not symmetrical. I've marked a specific lobe to come to this point right here so that it's in the right place. I'm going to get my cap on, make sure that I'm not pinching any of my diaphragm. A little bit of a precarious maneuver, but here we go. I've released the pressure on my slide with my index finger. Now I can get my screws, start getting this into place. Alright. Not tight, just in place. The second one. Not tight, just in place. My third screw. We're really close. Close to having this thing together. In place, not tight. Now, my throttle cable retainer. I'll get my last screw up on top, make sure its threads are engaging properly. Get it down, not tight, just in place. I'm going to come through and finger tight, plus, you know the name of the band, you know the name of my favorite nursery rhyme, plus. I've left this one a little bit loose to give myself a little bit of play to finish getting this mounting screw in place. I've got a little trick here that I like at the very end. I'll get this finger oh my goodness. Finger tight and finger tight plus here. Let's do this in a non-awkward fashion. There we are. And that sound was just the thing that I like to do, which is ensure that this stop is lining up properly with this screw here. Now, our slide or our carburetor should be fully assembled. That's a fully assembled carburetor. Check my action on my slide. Feels good. The butterfly is still functioning properly. Everything is tight. I wonder about that rattling sound, so hopefully we'll cover that. All my screws, since I've been ensuring to do them finger tight as I go along, are fine. Everything looks great. I have no parts left over. I can put my tools away and call it a wrap on the video. Alright, we got it. Saw some jets, saw some bowls, saw some floats, slides, needles, great stuff. Some throttle linkage. Learned a lot, saw a lot, practiced some tools, didn't make any too bad of mistakes or strip anything, so that was great. That was pretty fun. This carb's brand new, so it's clean, it's good to go. Alright. Jeffo signing out.